6 days of pure magic. Human Design Rave Festival 2024.
Welcome, welcome, everybody. Hello to you and hello to Ryan.
Hello, thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
Well,
Yeah, indeed. It's very special the way we found you and we really invited you, and then we discovered that you are projector genetic time. So everything, of course, works according to the strategy and authority without us even consciously knowing that that's what is. And yeah, we'll share your story bit by bit. And actually, before we started recording, we also organically started talking about the fact that it's a very little people that we have in the certified community that are around age 30. Mostly people get into human design when they're kind of been there, done that, and okay, how else you can surprise me? Yeah. Then they discover the systems like, okay, there's even this thing now. I can go on and on with this, and really, there is no end to the depth of observation of life, of self, through life, with this everything that the system gives us. But yeah, how did your path started? And so can you a little bit present yourself and really share the story of how it all began for you?
Sure. So my name is Ryan Hanna. I'm originally from Canada. I grew up in Ontario. It was actually my wife who discovered human design around 2014, and she had found it through participating in an influencer's webinar who she had been following, who she wasn't an analyst or a teacher, but she had just come across it herself and was really enthusiastic about it and decided to share it with her community. And so Willa found it, and straight away she noticed how unique it was in the sort of information and the amount of detail that the system obviously on the surface was able to provide for an individual. So she soaked it up really quick. And it actually took me about a year to really come around to kind of being curious what it is that she had discovered. So it wasn't until I think it was actually Christmas Day, so the 25th of December, 2015, when I first ran my own body graph for the first time. So she had been experimenting with it, studying it, taking courses from anybody she could find. And it took me about a year to come to it and to really begin investigating for myself the information that it had to offer for me. We both share similar spiritual interests, which I won't get into detail about. However, I think human design was an amazing complement for us in understanding sort of the mechanics behind the form, and that creation, life has structure, and that there's inherent meaning in that structure. So those kind of things really spoke to us. And the more, of course, we studied our own charts and our own family members' charts, it became ever more apparent that that's precisely the kind of breakthroughs and realization that human design can provide. Is this like really profound and deep understanding of not only yourself, but the people around you. Interestingly enough, at the time, I was actually working guiding as a professional cycling coach, using a very interesting kind of cutting edge technology that allowed us to measure individual capacity and then design workouts where each individual person would work out at their own level, but in a group. So if you think about it, my mind was already trained and curious and into the fact that we all have unique differentiated capacities, if you will, right? So when I learned about human design and I started to learn about the types and the energy types and the non-energy types, it really struck a bell with me. And I actually remember running charts of clients I had at that time, and also athletes, like famous professional cyclists, right? To see like, okay, are they a generator? Are they a projector? Are they a manifester? What energy centers do they have defined? Where are they getting their power from? What is their speciality? So of course, as a projector myself, it was like immediately, okay, like how can I utilize this to understand the people around me? And it took some time to actually discover really what human design is, and that there actually is like a professional pathway to becoming an analyst, and what that role and that job actually is. Like I had no idea at first that there was even such a thing as a professional analyst, or even training programs. Didn't really know. So it took some time and some investigation. Again, my wife is a 5-1, so she was definitely critical in the investigation component. And eventually we came to understand that, of course, you get a foundation reading is really important. It's a really important step in the journey for a lot of people, so that you can have someone relay to you objectively your nature and your strategy and your authority, characteristics of your design. And then we discovered, of course, the foundation courses and then the analyst training. And I think for me, with a lot of individuality, being a projector, I'm a 6-line profile, it all really resonated with me to actually be able to step into that role at some stage, where I was like, okay, I'd like to be able to utilize this system in assisting others, not just for my own personal gain or my own personal insights, although I've done that a lot. I've gained a lot of personal understanding from the system. There was definitely a resonance to eventually being able to offer services to other people to assist them in coming to understand their design. I think, again, because I had already come from a coaching and performance background, and being so transpersonal and other oriented, it made sense for me, right, to pursue that path. So yeah, I mean, I will say personally, human design was incredibly validating. Validating, is that what the word? Yeah, a lot of people refer to it as validating. And again, especially when I started to run the charts, and the more I learned, the more I was able to interpret about other people and seeing the truth in the characteristics, the gates, the channels, the type, especially someone's type, discovering that all of my parents and my siblings are generators and manifesting generators, and I'm not, and the conditioning impact of that, I think I have one uncle that's a projector, and everybody else is an energy type. And being able to reflect on my experiences from early childhood and growing up, and being able to understand more clearly the conditioning impact of that, not necessarily in a bad way, but just being conditioned to be like a generator, or even more so like a manifester in certain circumstances. So yeah, the process of learning about other people's designs that I had close relationships with has also helped me a lot to accept and to step into my projector qualities, which has taken years, I think, to fully embody. It can be challenging, right? It comes with certain difficulties. It's not as common. The strategy and the energetic availability, waiting for invitations, important invitations. Again, naturally, I had received a number of really important invitations that were pivotal, and and where I traveled and the sort of things that I studied, and eventually became involved with professionally, even now, human design. So even before I discovered that I was a projector. But I think even without the understanding of your own particular design at a deeper level to see where you're conditioned, which I think is something that a reading would provide, or like a foundation course provide, you can still be invited into situations and end up bitter because you're still operating even within those invitations out of the not self, which for me was the case, for sure, in many ways. So again, growing and coming to find balance in how I use my energy. And I don't think there's been a day that's gone by now since that period of time where I don't think about human design, or I don't think about myself in relation to my own design. So for that, I'm very grateful. And it's certainly, at least at a deep internal level, helped me to transform and accept myself, and not try to struggle with it. So the professional pathway, yeah, has been very amazing. I've had amazing teachers. Brian Stout, I had my foundation reading with Brian Stout. He's based out of Colorado. Integration, manifesting generator, amazing talent. And he helped us both, Will and myself, so much in our developmental process with the system, to understand how to interpret a chart, to understand how to synthesize a chart, even just understanding the basic foundational information, right? He's played an incredibly important role in my educational development. So shout out to Brian. I'm now studying with Lavina Archers. I've almost completed PTL2 semester 2, so cycles and connections, which has been fantastic. I think the work that can be done with connections analysis is pretty profound. And maybe, Julia, you have some experience, I'm sure, with that.
Yeah, we both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But probably more so than me in actually working with a lot of people with their connection analysis chart, like their composite charts. I think there's a huge untapped potential there, especially for like parents and their children, because it's not even just about romantic couples or lovers where you look at their charts. It's any two people, right? Brother and sister, father and son, mother and daughter, colleague. Of course, there's the BG5 terminology for business analysis, but even still with connection analysis using the original human design terminology can be really profound in understanding how we connect to the other people in our lives. So that's been a lot of fun to learn about. And then I guess it would be appropriate to mention also that I went through the Living Your Design certification program with Carol Zimmerman. And so I'll be my lecture, my talk at the festival will be primarily oriented around the 9 centers, the not self strategies, the sort of dependencies that these not self strategies develop within us. And that particular course, the Living Your Design course, I think is also a really powerful experience for people, especially newcomers who have just had a reading and want to learn more, but also want to be able to embody the knowledge more correctly for themselves and in a deeper, more insightful way, beyond just the basic mechanics, to really understand how you process information, how you're wired to energetically engage with other people, where your susceptibilities might be to negative patterns of conditioning. All of that's really important. So that's kind of where I'm at right now in my educational journey. I actually have a class today in PTL2. And of course, listening to endless raw lectures. Oh my God. A lot. Which, again, shout out to him as well, because he did do an incredible job, from my perspective, at least, in what I've taken in over the years, in teaching the foundations of the mechanics, so that we could actually conversate about it, so we could talk about it, so that we could become professionals in this field, right? To set that standard and that understanding and that knowledge base, I think was really, obviously he didn't do it alone. But I think he obviously played a tremendously important part in it that we've all benefited greatly from. And yeah, so any other questions? I could just probably keep going, but
Yeah, actually, for me, and I already mentioned it prior to recording, but it's amazing to see such a young person who is on the professional path with human design. And you're also one of the moderators in Discord, which is used primarily by youngsters, right? So it's really interesting for us that you tell us more about the new generations and the young people who found human design or just find human design, because they're very different. I have a daughter, she's 13, and I really see that they're very different. So I'm really interested in your perspective and what you are seeing, especially as a transpersonal profile who just got on the roof, by the way. So that's the second question. How was it before?
well, I'm alive. I survived it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So maybe we'll start with the 6-2 process, and then we can evolve into the Discord conversation, the generational differences. So yes, I'm a 6-2 profile. I'm a 6-2 energy projector, defined root, defined solar plexus, G, throat, and ajna. Honestly, when I read about my profile, I was gobsmacked, because it was so accurate in the way in which it described my early years, like the period of the decades leading into when I discovered human design, and then the years remaining before I've now been on the roof. There's no escaping that process, even with the knowledge, right? So I think I found human design when I was around 26 or 27. So I hadn't even yet crossed over into my Saturn return. I had my Saturn return when I was 29. I'm 32 now. Trial and error. Bonds made and broken, deep bonds made and broken, being called to a role where, because I'm an 8 sun, so I've always been called to situations and roles where my contribution was basically what I was there for. I was there to make a specific contribution. Again, I'm using that cycling coach as a position as an example. I was a lead coach for this company in Canada, and yet now, after it's all said and done, after all the dust has settled, I don't maintain any of the relationships from that period of time. They came into my life. It showed up in my life. I was called, invited into those situations. And yet all of the bonds basically were made, sustained for a certain period of time, and then broken. And there was a point in time where I was like, okay, do I struggle to try and hold on to this? I've got an open spleen, right? So do I struggle to try and hold on to these relationships, this job, this bond, this social, call it network? Or do I experiment with my strategy and my inner authority and see where it takes me? And I think luckily, I honestly just think I was kind of lucky. I had my foundation reading. I understood the mechanics of my design, and I've been able to experiment with my strategy and inner authority through the tail end phase of my 3rd line journey, so that you know, not to internalize the pessimism, or not to think that it was anything that I necessarily did wrong or could have done better, that it's just the way it's meant to be, right? The bonds made and broken, the trial and error, bumping into allies, bumping into people, bumping into human design, bumping into studies outside of human design as well, that got me so far. But again, I don't necessarily, I'm not engaged in any of the career paths other than human design actively that I studied for when I was younger, right? And I think for any 6'2" out there, or 6'3" or 4'6", 3'6", and if you have that, maybe more so in my experience, where there's the absence of a 3 in the profile, so the 6'2" and the 4'6", right? To recognize that the first 30 years is literally going to be like an experiment that will likely go wrong. Hopefully you can learn something from it, and don't be too sad by the fact that most of the relationships that you form, especially ones outside of your immediate family, may not actually last. They may come and go, they may be quite transient, and that when you go up onto the roof and you enter into your 30s, you'll likely have a few close connections, which I do, right? I still have wonderful relationships with my wife and my family, and like my immediate family, my siblings and stuff. But my social connections, right? Who I was being and who I was showing up as during that period of time transformed a lot. So yeah, it's just for any 6-line profiles out there who are listening to this in the future, especially if you're in your younger years, which is a great segue into your other question about the generational differences. Especially if you're in your younger years, study your profile. If you can, get a reading with a trained analyst who can help you to understand where you're likely to experience that trial and error. And again, looking at the gates or the channels where those third lines are in your design to understand that process, right? So again, for me, 8th gate, third line's line of the phony, right? So I was like in these social situations, making a contribution, but I'm not really being myself as a 6. I'm kind of taking on a style, making a contribution, bond made and broken. So to understand the mechanics can help a lot, to just accept the process and try to give yourself the strength and the internal fortitude to move through it without caving in on the pressure or the disappointments. Because I think there's really good things to come for all 6-line beings, especially moving into the future, right? 2027 and beyond, that global 6-line theme, there's definitely a role to be played by those with the 6-line profile in a new unique way in the world. You just got to get through the early trial and error phase. So going into your other, and I think it's a great point, I've seen it in my generation and the generations younger actually than me as well, where you have a lot of new people who are interested in human design. And they're an entirely different, maybe even 2 or 3 generations removed from the first wave, right? I kind of consider myself somewhere in between like the first wave and like the new generation that's most interested, kind of at the tail end of that. But of course, there's even younger people now who are into it. And it's actually an interesting statistic. When I was running data for an LYD I was doing back in 2019, so before the lockdowns, before the pandemic, before we were all trapped at home, on the Jovian website, and the number of charts that were run at that time in their database was just over 28 million on the Jovian website. And early this year, I had a look, and it's over 41 million chart calculations.
Yeah.
So within a span of only a couple of years, there's just been a doubling almost of people who are actually interested enough in the system to go to the website. And that's just Jovian Archive, right? To just go to Jovian Archive and run their chart, almost a doubling. So like 20 plus million new interested minds in the system. And it's remarkable. I think with the younger generations too, see, I'm a Scorpio Pluto. I always look at the outer planets, right, for a lot of insight in that. So like I'm a Pluto and Scorpio, 43rd gate and the first gate. I think and that Pluto was around that area for quite a long time, moving through the 90s, right? I think there's maybe an added sort of resonance, or call it a mental, because it was in the 43rd gate for quite a long time, like a mental resonance to derive insights about oneself as a Plutonic theme in the generation that I see a lot when running charts, especially in the Discord forum. There's a lot of people from like the early 90s, mid 90s, when they were born, who are interested in human design or trying to extract some sort of creative insight from it and how they could apply it to themselves. That's one thing that I've seen, right? And sort of been like pondering, okay, I wonder if that has had an effect in the attraction for the younger generation. And then of course, social media, right? There's a lot of activity on the Facebook groups. There's a lot of activity on YouTube, Instagram. More and more people, certified or otherwise, find human design and enjoy sharing it for their own reasons. And I think for a lot of people, that's helped spark interest, which ultimately, at the end of the day, is all very positive. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. And I think it's only the start of a wave, right? An exponential increase in the interest of the knowledge base. And especially, I would think, even continuing to organize events like the Human Design Rave Festival is really important, because people see this, right? They see, wow, there's a community. There's people who are actually like educated in this. They're in a sense experts in this field, and they have an understanding that can be shared and can be transformative, and that it's there's like an integrity and a standard that's very apparent. That, yeah, I think hopefully, and would make sense logically, would be an inspiration to future generations of people coming in. And also you see a lot, especially on Facebook, again, because the Facebook groups are so active, you see a lot of parents now with young children who are more open to learning about their child. It's mostly, you see a lot of people just interested about their child, not necessarily about them. It's more rare when they want to know both, but learning about their children and learning about maybe specific parenting techniques that they could apply to help to nurture that child, so that that child can become its authentic self. I think maybe in one circumstance. And then also it seems that there's people who are turning to human design as a solution for the challenges and the issues and the problems that they're facing in their relationships, more and more so now, just for just the basic difficulties, not even necessarily dealing with like self-expression level of nurturing to really help differentiate the child. Just like, hey, how can this help? I heard about this from my friend. I saw this YouTube video. I saw this post on Instagram. How can this be of benefit? Right.
Which is amazing, because the only way to actually get to the children is through the parents. So And this knowledge is for the future generations. It's for now to bring on to people so they can have a good life and authentic frequency. So it's really, really important that it's getting out there to the children. So it's a good trend. And says good about parents, the parents that they are looking for new ways, and they're not stuck in the old ways. They see that the old ways don't work. And also there is a whole world movement about changing the educational system, because it was created during the factory times, the industrialization age, and it carries with it a lot of old seven-centered way of studying, which is totally irrelevant for these days. So parents see that education is not working anymore the way it used to, and it's damaging children. It's taking them further away from their individuality, instead of, because the industrial age, it's about let everybody be the same so that we're easier to manage and stuff. And now we're in the age of individuation, where everybody, even they don't know about human design, but everybody's like talking about new and improved, and that innovation is super, super important, and being different, differentiation, how to differentiate from competitors or from this and from that. It's a big thing, differentiation. And still we keep our children in school in the square, cutting off their individuality and making them the same, trying to make them the same, and this cannot work. So human design is even more important now. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it addresses these complex issues, I think, in a very graceful way, in a simplistic way as well. Learn about your type, honor your strategy, honor your inner authority, come to know your profile. And then all the other details like PHS, Rave psychology, environment, dietary regiment, that can come as a subsequent to that, is really, I think, is really profound as well.
But it's beautiful that what you are going to bring to the festival is actually something very, very foundational. Because sometimes when people get to know the system, including myself as a 1-3 projector, on the 3 months after I was already knew all the substructure, I went to colors and the tones and all of that. And now looking back, I don't regret anything, but obviously it brought a lot of distortion into the experiment, because a lot of decisions were taken not from strategy and authority, but from knowing the design. And where we are going really with this festival, even though there's a lot of deep topics that are going to be exposed, of course, but everything is in the context of living, of really, it's not even experimenting, it's more of just living our life beyond concepts, which is very much distorted in the community, because a lot of people think that human design is all about concepts, it's all about the typology and these things. So yeah, it's really great that what you will bring is something very, very foundational, and at the same time doesn't matter you go with PHS and BG5, and I'm doing DDP at the moment, we still talk about centers, we still talk about type. It's just different levels, but in the end, this is the information that is in the way so endless and so deep that there's no end to depth of that's behind every keynote. So can you tell us a bit more precisely of what exactly we're going to to hear, to receive, to smell, to see in your work?
Sure. So without giving it all away in this interview, my intent with my lecture is to tie in the impact of the cross of planning, okay, and the transitional period that we're going through now towards the cross of the sleeping phoenix. So from institutionalized sameness, global, tribal, collective, committed bargains, being basically pigeonholed into a career path where, again, everything is like a factory, like you mentioned, Veronica, to evolving into a time period where the differentiated self and the self-empowered individual capable of being self-centered in a healthy way, not to say it's entirely selfish, although the 3420 we know being part of integration and that channel being a part of the cross that's coming for our new era can be very self-centered and selfish and concerned with the sanctity of one's own person. So tying in, again, the principles and the foundational knowledge that's available to people through the Living Your Design course, through the perspective of, look, this is the background frequency that we've been in. And how has that created dependencies through our not self strategies on that time period? Because if you think about it, for example, one simple example, undefined head center. What do we know as a not self strategy with the undefined head center is you're always seeking inspiration. You're always trying to answer everybody else's questions. And it creates a dependency on institutionalized think tanks and institutionalized sources of information for the individual to be able to find the inspiration that they so seek, even though it's a not self strategy to be completely absorbed in one's head, right? So each one of the centers will have a very specific tie-in to that period of time with, again, very easy to understand and practice with insights and techniques for how to shift out of that and essentially decondition. So it's going to be sort of like a mini LYD and decondition these tendencies and these dependencies to become more aligned with your definition, with your true self type, strategy, your inner authority, right? Yeah, I think that's a pretty good basic description of it. Yeah. So it's going to be sort of like a mini LYD. I'm going to touch on all the centers, I'm going to touch on the not self strategies, and I'm really going to tie in again how the not self strategies have created dependencies on the cross of planning era that is slowly but quickly disappearing, right, in our times. And I think it'll be an insightful journey. Hopefully it'll be filled with conversation and people sharing and sparking of insights. So I look forward to it. Yeah.
We're also looking forward to it.
Okay.
And you who are watching us, are you looking forward to it? You're certainly invited to join, and we would love to have you.
Yeah, see you in January 2024, online or live in Sofia.
Yeah.
And Ryan, we see you online. So very, very, very much looking forward. I myself took 9 Living Your Design courses, and taught maybe at this point over 30 groups myself, and I can say that it's never boring. It's always fresh. So I personally looking forward your offering to hear this again through your perspective, the projector perspective, your guidance, and yeah, thanks a lot for joining us in the festival.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation. Look forward to it.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye and see you soon.
Ciao, ciao.
Get your tickets today. See you soon.